So in this video, I'm going to go over two particular techniques for debugging your code. The first is logging to the logcat. And you've seen this technique already in class a couple of times. And the other technique that I'm going to demonstrate is called setting breakpoints and stepping through your code. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So first we'll start with logging to logcat. And this type of debugging is sometimes called printf debugging. And that's because of a function in the C programming language, which prints to the console. And of course, for early C programmers, that's how they debugged their code. If you hear somebody say printf debugging, that's just what they mean. It's just printing current values in your code to a console or to an output, some way that you can take a look at them as the code, after the code executes or while the code's executing, depending. Well, in our case, in Android, we log to the logcat. So just to familiarize you with what I've got that I'm working on here, it's a really simple app, single activity. It has a data class that I'm not going to look too much at, but allows you to put a value in here, hit calculate button, and then it comes up with a tip amount, right? So pretty straightforward. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to be able to look at the output from my code in logcat. As we've seen before, you start by creating a tag for your activity. That way you can filter out all of the material, all of the reports in logcat that you don't care about, because logcat, let's go ahead and clear that. Logcat is a noisy place. Noisy place. Look at all that. So much stuff, right? But we only want to take a look at our data. So I'm going to add some new log messages here. And we're familiar with the log I method. The log class has several very unhelpfully named methods, and you kind of have to know what they are, what they do, to know what they mean. So log I just means that you're going to be logging to the logcat with the quote information level of priority. And it just means that it's going to print to logcat in normal black, right? So I'm going to say log tag I'm informational. Right. And you'll notice that log actually has multiple different levels of feedback. So you can do log E, which is error. Tag I'm erroneous. And it even has stuff like WTF. And then it has like some more esoteric ones like log dot, let's see, what is it? Dot V, which I believe is very fine. And so on. So to view these, what we have to do is we restart our app, which restarts our activity. And so presumably all of these are going to get logged to the logcat, all these messages. So we're going to come over here, and then we're going to filter just on main activity. And here we see all of our messages that we've logged. So you'll notice that we've added I'm informational here, right? So it has information level. You can see that I'm erroneous has a shows up right here. WTF has shown off, shown up. But notice that that V hasn't shown up at all. And that's because V is that very fine level. To get that, you have to look at the verbose. So what this simply means is verbose, the verbose level, this is a filter. And when you say, give me verbose, it's just like, give me anything, clear the filter, right? Info means give me anything that's info about in the logcat. And that can be everything from stuff tagged as an I to things tagged as EN, WTF. And then you can see that there's different layers. So we've got warn. So WTF and E are both warning level of messages. Error. So .E and WTF, they both log error types of messages. Assert, we've got none of those. An assert is something that you would put into your code to test your code as it runs. I'm not going to cover that in this video. Debug shows us everything. So you'll notice that by using different methods of the log class, you can change, you can alter what shows up in your filters. Really, for your purposes in this class, you're probably not going to need anything other than log.i. As you get much larger apps that are doing much more things, you'll be more interested in and finely tuning how you log things. Okay, well that's printf debugging, which, like I said, we've already seen before. So now we're going to get to breakpoints and stepping through our code. So you'll notice that between the line number here and the actual start of our code, there's this big gutter in Android Studio. Well, one of the things that we can do is that we can click it and a little red dot appears. Well, what happens when our code is executing in debug mode, so that means when we click this button right here, is that our code is going to run all the way up until it gets to this line of code right here. Then it's going to stop. And when it stops on this line of code, we're going to have a chance to take a look at what's going on in our program at this point in the code's execution. So here, I will demonstrate. And run it, or debug it, as the case may be. And it's going to do this, and then you'll notice that the code starts executing and then it stops right on that line. And what happens is that this debug menu becomes active. This debug menu is going to become your friend. It gives you a whole bunch of information. We're going to start from this side and go this direction. This is called the stack trace. This is the sequence of method calls that brought us to this part in your code. So if you have multiple methods in your code, you have a method that calls a method on the same object, which calls a method on a different object, you can see all the way through what happened. And you'll also notice that this right here is white, whereas this is yellow. I believe that means that this is actually your code, whereas all this is actually Android code, framework code, right? This right here tells us which thread is currently being debugged, so which thread on the device. For most of the time, you're only going to be looking at the main thread, which is where activities operate. Sometimes you might have other threads when you're working with multi-threaded apps, and sometimes services. But in this case, main thread, that's fine. Over here, you'll see that we have a list of variables. Now, this item, this refers to the current instance of the activity that we're looking at. So we can actually expand this and take a look at some of the fields of this instance. That's actually pretty handy, right? Because it allows us to to investigate what's going on inside of an object should we need to. It also has the convenience of bringing some variables up to the top. So you'll notice like the this.types, which is a field we defined in our class, shows up in this variables field. The saved instant state, let's see if I can, saved instant state, that was the parameter passed to our activity when it was created. You notice that that also shows up in this variables. And then this little pane right here, this shows where my breakpoints are. So you'll notice that it has a couple of breakpoints shown right here. Now the rest of these icons here are what you use for shuttling backwards and mainly forwards in your code while it's in debugging mode. So I'll demonstrate that. So you notice that we've hit this method right here, set content view. And I actually have a couple options. One is that I can just go to the very next line in my code, by clicking the step over button. And you'll notice it goes right here to toolbar. And I click this again. And you'll notice that now there's a toolbar, that the toolbar variable now shows up in my variables list. Kind of nice. Now let's say that I actually want to see what's going on inside of this method. So I want to peek at what's going on inside set support action bar when it gets called. This is when I click step into. You'll notice that this is going to take me inside of the Android framework code that's being executed. This could be your code. Like if you were making, if you stepped into code that you defined in a custom class from one of your own activities or fragments or something, you'd be looking at your own code. But really, this allows you to drill down into different levels of your code. And you also notice again right here that here's on create. That's white, so that's again my code. And then you'll notice that this right here is yellow, because that's the Android framework code. So, and when I'm done peeking around at some other method, I can step out, which brings me back here. So now I can step over and keep on going. Now this is pretty tedious, stepping one at a time, line by line by line. If you want to go a little bit faster, you can just click this button, the resume button. And that takes you immediately to your next breakpoint. You click it again, and since there are no more breakpoints inside of this method, and when this method completes, our app is now visible and whatnot, the breakpoints all go away. We can, of course, set a breakpoint here, right? And on click, so that we can see what happens when we raise an event. And lo and behold, it hits our breakpoints, and we get the same sort of diagnostics that we can use as with the onCreate method. One of the things that I want to point out here that's kind of cool. So we want to know, if we want to know what the text value of this edit text is, I can come here to the edit text. I can expand it. And then I can come all the way down to mtext. And there it is. There's the value. There's the value of the text, of that edit text view. And when I'm done, I hit the resume button and the execution resumes. All right, so I've shown you two different techniques for debugging your code: printf debugging and breakpoints. Hopefully this will help you when you get stuck with your code. Printf debugging in particular can be really, really powerful because it allows you to really see what's going on at different execution points in your code. And you can get really nifty about how you move backwards and forwards in different points of your code. But your most fundamental line of debugging will be using the logcat, of printing to the logcat, because that way you can just quickly at a glance make sure that specific things are happening in your app. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions Of course, feel free to contact me, and good luck. I will see you in class.